You've heard of a 6-string guitar. You might have even ran across a 12-string, sometimes maybe even both on the same guitar. But have you ever heard of a 10-string? Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. It's been a long time since I've had one of these on the show. Tonight we are talking about the 10-string BC Rich guitar. These things are crazy. The first time you see one, you'll never forget it. Because just look at this thing. It's a crazy, wacky, out there shape. It's got 100 million different knobs on it. A wrapped tailpiece with dual humbuckers, some really cool cloud inlays going on, and then you have a fancy wooden peg head veneer with a giant R on it. And as if all this wasn't enough, you flip it on over to the back, you can see it's a neck-through construction, and we've got 4 tuners down here, 6 more on the back side of the headstock, and you can see how those first 4 strings anchor off up here. This is a quite cheekily named model. The company is BC Rich. So this model is known as the Rich Bich. There's no T in there. It still sounds like it. Yes, it is intentional. It's a joke. They also have a son of a rich model. But if you're having your mind blown here, what? I didn't know BC Rich made something so beautiful. Let's fill you in on a bit of history. Because if you've been to Guitar Center at any point in time, you probably think, BC Rich, they're just cheap import guitars. They're usually crazy, chuggy metal shredder guy shapes. They have their demographic, but their solid body electric guitars actually started all the way back in the 70s. Bernardo Chavez Rico, BC Rich. He was originally a classical guitar maker. He's got a cool fancy story. You can learn a little bit more about that in the Seagull episode, which was their very first solid body electric guitar. But the guy we need to focus on today is actually Neal. He was a subcontractor and designer for BC Rich guitars. From 1974 until 1985, he helped design many of the classic era BC Rich guitars, including the Eagle, the Bitch, and then to round out that classic era, you get the Warlock. But the Rich Bich first came out for the NAMM show of 1978. And those original designs are so beautiful. I love them. You can see the neck through construction. I've always loved multi-laminate wood construction guitars. Even though I'm kind of a dyed-in-the-wool Gibson traditional guitar shape guy, I love those things because they're so unique. And the original adopters of the guitar are pretty cool. You've got Slash and Joe Perry bringing it to audiences worldwide, and Kerry King's another big endorser of these instruments. But you also have people like Dave Mustaine and Lita Ford. These were considered cool. But the it factor for these has to be the 10-string appeal, as well as the Moser designed electronics. And we'll talk about all that crazy stuff over on the Workbench, but I'm sure you're curious. What exactly is going on here? It's not 10-string doom juggy jug metal guy, where you've got actually 10 strings across an extra wide neck. This is just like a 12-string guitar, but you don't have the octave doubles on your lower strings. The whole purpose of that is under heavy distortion, you can still do your low chords without that chorusy-like effect, but then when you want that for your top strings, you can still get it. The first Rich Bich that I had documented was a custom order for a guy named Dusty Stone. He actually had his custom ordered the opposite way, where it was the top 2 strings that were left bare, so he could do meedly-weedly solos without the weird doubling effect. But he wanted the chorusy parts on the bottom. But if you're not familiar with 12 strings, the top 2 strings are just drones of each other, so it's the exact same tuning, it just sounds slightly different. But then your next 2 are octaves of each other. Now keep in mind, you can tune it whatever way you want if there's other ways you'd like to. Tuning's never 100% perfect on 12 strings, and that adds to the fun. But the beauty of these things is, if that doesn't appeal to you, you don't have to even string those up. You can just take it off, and there's dedicated 6-string models out there too. You can also find them in Floyd Rose and all these other variations. So consider that an optional feature of these guitars. Otherwise, you've just got your wrap tail over here. And as far as the Moser electronics, it's not too bad to understand. This is a master volume control that works for both pickups. Your neck section, this is just a regular 3-way toggle switch. Helps you select between neck, bridge, or both together. These 2 are preamp on and off switches for the neck and bridge pickup. and then you have a phase switcher right here. And this one has a slightly modified design. Usually these are flipped, but when you have your preamp on for these guys, this controls the volume of that particular circuit. This one is a gain control for your preamp setting. This knob is for the neck pickup volume only, say if you wanted to have that set a certain way for more jazzy rolled down tones. It's kind of like what you have on some Gretsch guitars. You can just set that and forget it. And then this is a 6-position Varitone switch, so lots of fun there. And this should be your master tone control. And then these guys are your series parallel switches for your neck and bridge pickup, so it'll give you a slightly different wired tone. And obviously our output jack on the side. But if you're wondering why this bitch looks a little bit differently, it's because we've got a maple cap on this one. That's not how they necessarily constructed them in their original era. They would just let it be neck through looking. But we can still see that this one is neck through. They just wanted to fancify it, I guess, and not have the additional laminations of wood along the maple neck. But now I know what you're thinking. So when was this one made? It's actually pretty much brand new. The year was 2025. As we learned earlier, Moser first started in 1974, so for the 50th anniversary, BC Rich hires Neal back to make some of these classic designs again as a master luthier for their company. So I would assume that started in 2024. Maybe they were a little bit late. I'm not necessarily an expert on this. I was reached out to by Sam S. over in Australia, and he's utilizing my forwarding service to get this new guitar to him. So thank you, Sam, for entrusting me to help you get your guitar. I'm sure a lot of people will enjoy seeing the full documentation of this. If you're curious how much this was, it was $7,500 brand new. But it does come with a pretty nice case. It says BC Rich on the outside. The interior is this really nice, slightly magenta purple hue. It plays with my camera, but this is as close as I can get it. It has a little bit more red to it in person, but it's a quality TKL made in Canada case. Oh no, cool. He actually has a little diagram in there explaining all the controls. Going off the vintage ones seem to work, except for instead of preamp, he just calls it a boost. But look at that, even on that. I'm curious if that was a goof or a custom ordered spec, because that is a little bit different. It seems every time I review a bitch, it's just always plagued with something being different. Check this out, there's a block of wood in the case being used as a COA. That's really cool, but at the same time, I bet that'd be really easy to counterfeit. But then again, the guitar is what speaks for itself. But it's nice to have something to match up. We also have some setup tools and keys, but uh-oh, somebody didn't give the message to TKL. It's not spelled with a T. Gotta censor that. I've gotta say though, I don't know about the fit of the case. That should be tighter for being custom ordered. But to learn more about this 2025 bitch, let's go ahead, throw it onto the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. We'll start our documentation of the pickups. I noticed something kind of strange. So regular Seymour Duncan, these are the Alnico 2 Pro set. I believe Slash utilizes a similar set, so it makes sense that they would come in this, but do you see what I see? The bridge position has the neck pickup. The neck pickup has the bridge pickup. Now, when it comes to guitars that I haven't documented multitudes of, sometimes there's weird quirky features that you just have to get used to. I'm not sure if that's a goof up or just something that, hey, that's what you do on these. And as far as the readings within the circuit, I can't get my usual readings. I mean, this seems to affect it, but I can at least now verify that the down position means the boosts are off. When they're towards you, the player, that means they're on. But check out what I found in our bridge pickup cavity. Another date, 4/9/25, with some sort of a signature. And as far as the neck pickup cavity, not too much going on there. Now, if you're wondering, hey, why don't we see the maple top joining on to our mahogany body or whatnot? Remember, this is neck through construction. We're still seeing the interior of the neck. That continues all the way down here where our tuners are going on. That's just such a cool design. It's like a headless guitar, but not. It's just extra tuners here. And they're Grover Imperial style tips. For a new guitar, I noticed a few craftsmanship issues, I guess you could say. You've got a chip in the finish right here, as well as another one right over here. And while I would love to say that, oh, don't worry, it gets covered over by the pickup ring, that's actually not the case. Similarly, but less extreme, there's a small contamination / ding in the finish right there too by the neck. And while we're talking about it, there's a little gouge in our fretboard there. That one's kind of funny though, because sometimes there's actually a serial number on the last fretting area on select BC Rich guitars, so you could say that's a little bit of a throwback. But before we move on from the pickups, take a look at the spacing. This is only a 22 fret guitar, but it has the spacing that most 24 frets have. The pickups are rather close together is what I'm saying. We've got a distance of 1.42 inches, and there is a tiny gap between the neck and the neck pickup. But now we can look at our bridge / tailpiece combo. So it's your regular wrap tail. In fact, it's a Tone Pros AVT2, so very nice product. And you can just see they notch the saddles appropriately for the double strings and the singles. But that gives you the intonation ridges that you can individually move as well as do the rocking back and forth. But these strings go through the back, so like think string through guitar, you're just stringing through the headstock. And then it ends off back here. So if you turn the peg this way, you're loosening the string. If you turn the peg this way, you're tightening it. It'll take a bit to get used to that because tighten this way, so you got to move the opposite direction here. But let's take a second to appreciate the body. You do have a very nice carve along the edge to make it a little bit more comfortable to play, but it comes to a bit of a point, but again, still has that slight edge to it before it continues over here. Now, as far as a hard edge, that's what you have right here before it scoops away to here, where you have another hard edge before it softens as we come over here and get a little bit more exaggerated on our top horn. But here's a nice side profile shot again to show you just how thick that maple top is. We might not see it in the inside cavities, but you definitely see it on the edge. This isn't exact, but I'd say it's maybe a little more than a half. The full thickness of the body is 1.5. But as far as approximate dimensions of the rest, it's about 9.5 inches on your upper bout. The widest on the lower bout is 14.5. From the traditional base of the neck to the very bottom point is 15.5 inches. But the absolute longest the body is 19 inches. With a overall length all the way to the bottom, about 39.5. I suppose if you're curious about the diagonal, that's looking like 22 inches. But this is a two-piece quilt maple top. They did a really nice job hiding the seam line right there with similar pieces of wood. I think I would personally categorize it a little bit more of a quilt top. I mean, it's not too heavy, but there's enough wood grain fun to consider it a nice top. But the wood grain definitely steals the show more so than the figuring. But now we'll move on from the body to the neck. It's an ebony fretboard, and you have these pearl cloud inlays. They go from tall to slightly more squished as you go down in between the frets until it's really small all the way up here. These guys go for a 24 5/8 inch scale length. Either that or they're going after the Gibson version of a 24 3/4 inch scale. This model does not feature any binding, and I will give it to them. This ebony fretboard is so nicely sanded, it's very smooth. Although we do have a couple of imperfections over here, and to be honest, the edges of the frets, not from a fret sprouting standpoint, but just the edge itself is a little sharp. It would have been nice if we could have balled off the edges rather than just the end. And we've got a little bit of schmutz stuck within our wood grain here. I personally measure closest to a 16-inch fretboard radius, so that's rather flat. But they do make the neck a little bit wider, 1.76 inches. At the 12th, it's about 210. But our first fret neck depth, rather skinny, 0.846. And maintains its thinness, only 0.927 at the 12th. To be honest, I didn't notice how wide that neck was until I took that measurement. Now I do feel it, but it makes sense. You've got the double strings, you want just a little bit more room. As far as the neck profile itself, just feels like your standard C shape. Maybe a little chunkier than those numbers necessarily suggest. It's a good feel. Here's a look at that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. Exactly what I was talking about. C-shaped, but wide. But now the headstock. I'm curious how you guys feel about this particular color combination. I would assume this is something similar to rosewood, cocobolo, something like that, mixed with this lime green on the center. Maybe a lighter graham cracker-like color would have been better for like a key lime pie or something. But I love the original BC Rich models. They're so cool and inventive, and the big R is how they did it, and they had this style of wood for their headstock veneers, so I respect this because it's a callback to those. As far as the truss rod route, it got a little bit squirrely over there, but it does the job. But as far as the actual truss rod, it just looks like your standard import style one, but this one was made in the USA. And here you can see a close-up of the string ferrules. If you get really close, you can see the ending windings of the strings too. I wonder if it would actually be better to ball those up on the back if there's enough room in order to make that bend over not there, similar to what some people do for wraparound tail pieces. The truss rod cover itself though, it's blank, 2-ply material, black and white. Getting those strings back on was actually a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. If you're not fully changing the strings anyway, because the strings got all twisted, and it's like, well, what way is this supposed to go? So the way BC Rich does it from the factory, the prominent string tuned at the top of the headstock goes on the right side of the slot. And the ones that emanate from the headstock and come on down here to be tied off go on to the left. But I thought this looked weird. The strings cross underneath each other. And it's like, there's no way that's right. But I looked, yeah, that's how it shipped from the factory. But those have a much lower profile onto the headstock, so it's not a big deal. It just crosses under it. But now the real fun begins on the back. Let's take a look at these electronics. So we'll start with the back plate. It's quite massive, and it has this texturing to it. It feels kind of cheap in my opinion. You can see it's really bendy, but maybe it just feels that way because just yesterday I recorded another crazy guitar that had a much firmer pick guard. But also, to be fair, it's more so 1-ply, like you got that main white layer and then just a little bit of a black one on top for decoration. But that hides all of this. Neal is known for his fancy wiring jobs across his own brand, many of other different companies. I'm sure this takes a good hot minute to get everything right, let alone troubleshooting. But he's proud of his work. He signs it right there. Neal Moser. It's embossed Made in USA on our base plate. And I would assume this is one of our boost circuits. We've got something else hidden away inside here, as well as what I would assume is like the main circuit board in this. And then I like how he even seals off the 9-volt batteries just in case they explode or something. It gives it all a very nice, even, uniformed look. So 3 different boards and 2 batteries. As far as the pot values, this one's 500K. This guy's 250. It looks like this one might be another 250er, and you can see the CTS branding. This is the backside of our Varitone with all those wires going to it. A couple of our mini toggles for series parallel, and we've got our boost toggles hidden away underneath here, as well as the in and out of phase, and then we also have our toggle switch, and the master volume is a 500K. And I forgot to point this out earlier, that's the Moser logo. And you know what, I was gonna knock some points off because, oh man, that's so thin and flimsy, doesn't feel that good. I understand now. So much has to fit in there. It's a miracle it fits at all. But that's why the back plate will stand proud. Now, if you're curious, why does the finish look different here than there? Remember, this is a maple neck. It's actually 2 pieces even. They've done a really nice job of matching it up to the point where you might miss that at first glance, but if you're looking closely, you can see the seam line. But if you look at a piece of maple raw and look at a piece of mahogany raw, they have vastly different colors. So even though this is the exact same finish applied over both woods, it makes it look different. You can see all that nice mahogany wood grain here, and the more flat grain in the neck. Unfortunately, not much figuring in the maple piece, but they could build it like that if they wanted to. We've got a Dunlop strap lock stock at the back horn, and then another one on the back side again. But I found this interesting. Rather than just being sharp and pointy back here too, they actually saw it off a little bit, and they put a little rubber bumper on it. They've done the exact same thing on this other side too. I would assume so you can just stand it up against a wall or something without having to worry about dinging your guitar. I thought that was fun. But your output jack is located on the side, football style. And now the next cool part. So the neck actually extends a little bit farther on the back. Now, actually, no. Now that I look at that, that is not the neck. That is, on this particular one, the figured makeable top, because you can see where the neck ends right there, but that wouldn't line up for creating that little shelf for all these tuners. So those tuners are technically installed on the top of the instrument on this one. There you can see where the body just gets routed away, and then you can see where the maple top joins onto the rest. But moving on from our neck through portion, we can move on to our main part of the neck. You can see just how nicely sculpted away that is. They're very comfortable guitars to play all the way up there, but we can see some more of that wood grain and a bit of mineral streakages in our neck here before we get to the very top of the headstock. So just like at the bottom, it's Grover Imperial tuners. Here you can see the backside of the strings for the additional 4. And you know what? They are deep enough in there. You could probably fit another 2 or 3 ball ends if you wanted to do what I was talking about earlier. But even this is marked NM, I would assume for Neal Moser, made in USA. And then I'd hazard a educated guess that 25 stands for 2025, and this was production number 19 for that year. I'm not sure how many they made. The shop that the viewer got this from also has a black one. I think it has a Kaler equipped to it. It was about 500 or so cheaper. But sadly, there's one more thing I need to point out on a brand new guitar. The edge of the nut is really ugly. It looks like they had some chipping to the finish and they just tried to clean it up the best they could. In fact, it feels that the finish just stands really proud, so maybe they just didn't completely scrape it off and that's why they had issues. Or maybe the nut was supposed to be filed down a little bit more before installation, as it stands just a hair proud. But again, I haven't documented enough of these to know, is there normally finish over the edge of the nut or not? It doesn't look like that's the intention over here. But all said and done, this BC Rich weighs 8 pounds, 2 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in. Hear its tones from its flipped pickups to the flipped alternate reality of tones. To start, I have this in the most neutral positions possible. These little switches are up, we don't have any boost circuits, volumes and tones all on 10. And I have the Varitone in what I believe is position 1. Like a normal 12 string, quite chimey. But you can get just a bit more clarity, I guess you could say, on those lower notes. But now we'll cycle through the Varitone, starting with 1 again. That's just the neck pickup. You could technically do it for the bridge too. now we can try the middle position. Oh boy, that's overwhelming just in and of itself. But now, remember, we got this little doohickey right here. That is the middle position only. So you gotta have both pickups running. You go from this to this. It's kind of a nasally out of phaseness. But it sounds extra bright and nasally due to the whole doublings of the strings. If you don't like it, you don't have to use it. Now for simplicity's sake, let's go... I believe this turns it to parallel mode. It's one or the other. I would say I like the down position better. It's a bit fuller. But you can also use that with the Varitone. And now we need to talk about the tone control, because it's not like a regular tone control, I've come to find out. Okay, in this particular voicing, it acts a little bit more normal, but that pot is almost useless. It's got two main settings. I mean, you got very minor differences between, 10 to about 2. Then there's just a huge drop-off. But that's not your usual tone all the way rolled off. It's got an interesting deep tone to it. And of course, remember, you can use that tone control with all the Varitone settings too. And then once you find a position that you enjoy, now we can do the boost slash preamps. So kick those on. That's too much. Roll it down to like a 1.5. You have to be careful how you finger this, because if you accidentally cross the strings and put them together, you can get that weird alien-like tone, which, I don't know, maybe that could be a good thing. Let's just say a little goes a long way there. Let's try it with the neck. This is acting as a volume. Let's see, for both. It's like an overall master volume. So this is the only gain control. Okay, so if you have that crank, you can roll this down to tame it a little bit. Okay. I hope that gives you an idea of what you can get out of it. Personally, I've never been a fan of the electronics in these things. I mean, they're cool. It's a modern marvel of wiring, that's for sure. I prefer my guitars to be a little bit more simple than that, so I'm just going to kick on my regular distortion and we can have some fun there. yes, I know you're curious. Can you distort and boost? Yes. Not gonna lie, I think having the distortion with the preamp circuit, you could do some interesting stuff there with harmonics. It basically is like one of those Sustainiac pickups. It just keeps going forever. I thought that was just gonna be hot trash, but no, I'm pleasantly surprised. So, what are my final thoughts of the 2025 Neal Moser created BC Rich Bich? Is not for me. I love the way they look, but I don't know. 10 strings? Maybe I just don't know any songs that actually necessarily need that, and I would enjoy it better if I did. It's just so alien and foreign, but I'm so glad I at least got to try one again. It always felt like the thing was out of tune, but I mean, that's probably my fault. But for me, if I don't have the extra 4 strings there, it's just not as cool as a design, but I can totally see why people just choose to leave those 4 off and just rock it as a normal instrument. I'm messed up from my first one where I think it almost makes more sense to have the bottom 4 doubled, because then you can still do your meedly weedly solos without sounding super bright. But I hope you enjoyed my documentation of this guitar. Thank you, Sam, for entrusting me again to forward this to you in Australia. If you're watching this and you're like, hey, I live somewhere that's not the United States and I would like something out of that country, that's why my forwarding service exists. It can be any brand. It usually only makes sense if it's worth like $3,000 or more, but I'll leave that up to you ultimately. But you can find out more information over on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. All right, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow on the next one. Take care. If you still need more guitar fun in your life, you might check out these 4 episodes next. The Headless SG utilized a very similar stringing system, but without the strings on top. Rickenbacker has a very interesting way of making 12 strings. This one YouTube thinks you might like, and this one I like.